Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Hearthstone. Today is Monday, May 20th. I guess the first thing we need to do today is just jump into the solo expansion here and see if somehow, for some reason, this has decided to unlock the week 3 or chapter 3.
The Bank of Dalaran. You be distracting all the guards. We be taking all the loot.
So, I guess maybe there's an argument that I should play this in off screen and try and get this done, so that possibly by the end of chapter 5 at week 4, which is how this would line up, is that week 2 will unlock chapter 3, and then week 3 will unlock chapter 4, and then week 4 will unlock chapter 5. So yeah, maybe getting them all completed would be a good idea, but frankly I am just so busy right now, both playing the cell phone game Destiny Child, which is ridiculous that I'm playing it at all, and taking up a lot of time right now as they're doing a special event, but they kind of constantly are doing special events. And frankly, Hearthstone could learn a lot from Destiny Child. It has, being a game that's I think only 2 years old, it has a lot more variety in what you're doing, and a lot more microtransactions, quite frankly, and it's probably making more money. We have daily quests, win 3 tavern brawls, can't do that, so that will have to sit until Wednesday or get re-rolled. So then that just leaves us with a hunter and mage victory, which means if I just get one mage victory, we're as good as gold, and then we can play hunter. Of course, the question is, do I want to play casual mage or do I want to try and play ranked? And I think I'll just stay casual. On top of playing Destiny Child, which is taking up a lot of my time, certainly, I am also playing the Doom reboot. And with a few exceptions, I'm having a pretty good time and doing a pretty good job of it running through itself. Of playing through it and making recordings. The main exceptions I have is there's a lot of load screens. I've pretty much determined that the best way I could evaluate the Doom reboot, is probably not as much from people's experience or fun with the original Dooms. Because yes, the original Doom for some people was a multiplayer game, and that was the main focus. But for other people, it was totally those single-player storyline episodes. I think for a lot of people, and my experience in particular, was people got the shareware version of Doom, and they never bought the expansion that would have given you episode 2, 3, or eventually even episode 4 of Doom 1. So, in my experience in particular, is that I get motion sick on the original Doom things. Good thing I'm not getting motion sick on the Doom reboot, the 2016 reboot, but that would have been ridiculous if I was. But looking at id Tech and comparing it to like Crysis or Unreal, which I think is the way I have to look at this, there is this point where it is just loading in between levels to show you a load screen of text you don't care about. Sometimes that text is really just a recap of what either has been said right before the level or at the end of the level, because there's always a cutscene at the end of the levels I've played. I've done 3 levels so far. So what that boils down to is the game itself, the id Tech engine, could, in the middle of each of the cutscenes at the end of each level, be loading up the next level, because it's not like it's a random guess as far as what the next level is going to be. It's 100% linear. There's one exit point you get to, and then from that exit point you will enter the next level in a straight line. So there would have been no problem for that. Instead, id Tech is hanging on its technology a lot like the original Doom game, Doom maps and levels, where the maps were made as big as they could be to run on PCs at the time, and now their levels are much bigger and they're in 3D and their graphics are a lot more. It's a 64-bit program that, when I checked, was actually using over 2 gigabytes of RAM, which isn't really super surprising. Let's see, if I do this and then do that, I could kill one of these. But if I do this, then I can play that. Then do this. Let's see. In the turn there. All right. So yeah, there's load screens. There's load screens when you first launch the game, which is super annoying. There's load screens when you try to load into every level. Even if you are just playing the game as one consistent playthrough, you still see load screens. I could see if you exited out of the game, you would see a load screen to get back to where you were, but that's not the case. You're seeing load screens regardless.
I can taste the mana.
Okay. 6 damage to a character and freeze it. Two less for the elemental. There we go. In the turn. Yeah, we're good. We're potentially going to win next turn.
What shall we hunt?
So, on top of Doom having a lot of load screens, it's also feels kind of unbalanced. Like, I think Doom 3 originally, the original Doom 3, not the BFG remaster, also probably had some of this happen, where it was a case of the...
You require my assistance.
I don't know how to say this best. And well, because the game went 3D, it stops feeling like the original Doom, because you can like now take a slower time, and you're encouraged to take a little less time and fire. I'm playing Doom on the easiest mode, and still the enemies hit you extremely hard, which doesn't make sense at all. That might be very similar to the way Doom 1 played, but the idea is that you're taking 10% of of your health, which starts off at 100 points. So if you're losing 10 points, every time you're getting hit by even the lowest enemies, you're severely discouraged from running up to them and doing the glory kills in the Doom reboot, which is really what that game is selling itself on. And a lot of the enemies that are mid-tier or mini boss levels that I've seen so far have more than enough health that you really can't do glory kills. There was a challenge specifically to do glory kills on one of the mini bosses, and I tried it multiple times, and I literally think I couldn't jump high enough because I am fairly certain there is a double jump that I just haven't unlocked. And there definitely are guns I haven't unlocked, at least 2 more. There are definitely upgrades to guns, so it's a full RPG element. But it makes the game feel like the first time you're playing through it is for a kind of awkward, not well balanced story mode. It feels very much like it was balanced so that it was a multiplayer game, and you can definitely tell from the Doom reboot that they cared more about a games as a service multiplayer game than they did about telling a single player experience. When you get to the front of Doom, it is play Snap Map, use Snap Map to make levels, play the multiplayer to play those levels you made with Snap Map. It's really begging the people who are playing the game to do the job of the content creators and just make more content. I think there's only 11 levels in the single player experience. Well, how long to beat said it took about 11 hours, and these levels are pretty big. They're taking an hour plus each, so it might be less than 11. Honestly, after the 3rd level, it feels like it's giving me the feeling that's probably inaccurate, but it's giving me the feeling that the entire game might be over on the 4th level, but that can't be possibly true. There's too many rituals and other things. The rune trials, not rituals. Too many runes that haven't been collected, and too many things that would have to unlock in the next level. So clearly the story is just going to continue in some other way. But yeah, it feels really unbalanced when for the most part, you could shoot a Doom enemy in the original Doom like once or twice and it would die. That's kind of where it needs to still be in my mind, and it isn't there. It really doesn't feel like it's there at all. Instead, you get into these sections of fights, these encounters, a lot like Borderlands, where you get into an encounter and then there's a bunch of enemies that spawn and you fight them, and then sometimes it's a good 5 minutes of nothing until you walk into the next section where there will be another encounter.
Job done.
Whereas I also would have felt like the levels would have been crawling with enemies, even on easy. The enemies would have just died in one shot. That's kind of where I thought it would be. Let's see, what else can we do? Sure. That's exactly what we want. Right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. The verticality of Doom's maps also I find annoying, and the map system is super annoying. There's no mini map on the screen. There's no indicators on the screen other than your main objectives. There is a way to adapt some of the HUD interface, but a lot of the HUD interface I would like to look very different. So if there was a mod out there that could just put your health and your shields in the lower right hand corner alongside your weapon and your bullets, and if you could just move the HUD to the actual corners of the screen instead of being about 20% inset, that would be helpful too. But yeah, I've fully upgraded my entire auto sense abilities that it said it would increase my ability to detect things on the map, and it doesn't really do that. There's still very much a reason to need to find the map download station and get that map, and even then you'll see things on the map that at the moment seem to be hidden behind invisible doors or walls, but there's no button on the controller that seems to open doors. When you actually open a door, it automatically opens when you walk near it, or you press the right stick, you click the right stick, and I've walked up to walls and clicked the right stick. So unless I'm supposed to pull out the keyboard and type in the no clipping mode to get to these collectibles, which might exactly be the case, that would kind of suck though. Like, I get the idea of it being a callback to the original game, but actually having to use a cheat code to get all the collectibles in the game crosses a weird line where it feels like you're forcing people to cheat, and some people don't want to cheat. They want to be able to get all the collectibles, do 100% of the game without cheating. And the way we're getting abilities makes it feel very much like you're going to play the game twice in some kind of new game plus. So I wouldn't be surprised if an average player, if they were really gonna try, if they would inherently play the game on easy to unlock most of the things, then replay the game by selecting levels on easy, then starting a new game plus and turning it up to nightmare once you've unlocked everything, and then once you've defeated it on nightmare mode, you can play it on ultra nightmare, which is permadeath, and of course you can always avoid that by just having backups of your save files. So there's actually not even much of a threat on PC of that. I think even on Xbox One and PlayStation it's not particularly difficult to back up a save file to a external device. Alright, so let's start talking about the news at this point. Doom, I'm still enjoying it, but there's a lot of questionableness there. And if Doom Eternal, which I need to look this up, is the sequel to the 2016 Doom reboot, and it's not using id Tech, that would be probably a lot better if it was just using Unreal and had it. But also, id Tech is id Tech the company. It's both the name of the company and the engine, as far as I understand. If the company itself is owned by Bethesda, then this might just be an instance where they are being forced to adopt some of the low quality things that Bethesda does. When you have things like Fallout 76 come out, that certainly does not inspire confidence for Doom Eternal. Assuming Doom Eternal isn't a mobile game, which it might also be that. Alright. Let's play this to get rid of that. And play this to get rid of that. Just to play a little control. But yeah, if Doom Eternal switched to the Unreal Engine and got progressive loading and abandoned its multiplayer, which I think it has to. The achievements, by the way, on the Doom reboot half are involved doing things in multiplayer, and I looked in the multiplayer and it's like, there's nobody. There's literally nobody playing it, and that's not really surprising to me at all, because why would anybody be playing Doom multiplayer now in 2019? People probably only played it for what I would suspect is a minimal 6 months at best. I also went through, was a lot more picky about what games we're going to cover today, so hopefully that will have less garbage on Steam. So there's a lot of things that just visually I immediately dismissed, as I think until E3 happens we're going to have that. Oh, and then there was this one story that I don't really have an article about, but it is something I think people should be aware of and think about. So the most recent episode of the Life is Strange 2, I believe, it's actually Life is Strange 2, involved a sex scene with the 16-year-old character that was depicted in flashes, at least, because that's as much as I saw in screenshots. Not trying to be puritanical here, but this is a Western game, and very possibly the first time a Western game has realistically depicted an underage kid, or what would be considered underage, at least, having sex with, I imagine, another underage kid. It seems like you could pick the gender of your partner too, if that matters to anybody. Really doesn't to me, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind, the double standards of the mainstream video game media. This is where I would point out is, this happened, this was released, and it has not been reported by anybody in any kind of controversial or negative light. In fact, it was praised by at least one website. Whereas those same journalists will deride and ride like skimpy costumes in Mortal Kombat, which Mortal Kombat's a Western game too, but at least in Mortal Kombat it's adult-aged people that are in skimpy costumes, and they will definitely deride any kind of Eastern anime-esque characters that are any kind of form of skimpy clothing or nudity or sex. And at least the Japanese ones have the decency to say all the characters portrayed are 18 older, and at least play that song and dance. This one, Life is Strange, is definitely not doing that. Seems like if I was to guess, they probably painted themselves into a corner by not thinking it through, because you could have almost certainly had that character be 18 instead of 16, and it wouldn't have changed anything. Let's see. So yeah, that's the thing that happens. In the same way, you have Ellie. Interesting. Oh, this gave it charge. I thought for a second the spell I put on it accidentally gave it charge, but it didn't. So Ellie from The Last of Us in the first game, I believe, was like a 16-year-old, if not a 13-year-old. And the Sony E3 conference last year was showing her as not particularly aged too much, maybe just two or 3 years older, so maybe she was 18 and she's having this lesbian kiss at a barn tent dance thing, dance inside of a tent in the country, and again that was very praised, and it's like, oh, it's a little creepy, and that this is what people wanted. But a kiss is definitely not a full-on sex scene like Life is Strange 2 did, and I assume this is the first instance of that in a mainstream AAA realistically animated game. If there's another instance, I cannot think of it. So it should be reported, at least for the uniqueness in that case.
Well played.
I think I have enough to win here. Lemon Lovers on the tray says hello. He goes, ooh, I came in at a steamy moment, Rydo. Yeah, it's not so steamy, it's just the double standard, you know? Like this should have been reported in some form or fashion, if in the similar way that all the Japanese sex games get derided. They should be consistent, and not protect Western games and hold Western games to a different standard. I'm kind of an old hippie mentality, quite frankly, and so I would be fine with free love mentality. I guess I'm just gonna play a little ranked play, and so if the idea was that the video game journalist industry was all gonna take free love as a progressive policy to push, I'd be fine with that. Like, sure, why not? It is probably very common in the United States for 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds to hook up with other 16 and 17-year-olds. It just doesn't get mentioned, or it gets derided, it gets mentioned as a bad thing. As the Me Too movement and progressive and extreme SJW policies have been introduced, it's become even more dangerous for a 16-year-old to hook up with another 16-year-old, when frankly it should be less dangerous and less puritanical. It's so weird that the United States is still trying to embrace puritanical thinking. And certainly this is something that has been happening all of my life in the United States. A lot of push towards puritanical, frankly unnatural standards and requirements. Moving on, and coincidentally, the next article we have is the Otome Girls Maiden visual novel collection Brothers Conflict Precious Baby is coming to the Switch August 29th in Japan. I think I would say I am more than anything sad for the lack of romance too. That there is definitely something to be said that romance is missing in video games. Romance is missing in movies. Romance is missing in most novels that aren't romance novels. When you have something like 50 Shades of Grey being a terrible book that is just getting great sales on being slightly naughty and claiming it's romantic, when the romance in 50 Shades of Grey is actually not that good, and it's not a healthy romance. It particularly, from what I've seen in the movies, reviews of them, it's just it's not a good depiction. Or Twilight is another great example of really a codependent relationship instead of a healthy romantic relationship. So maybe it's two sides at opposite ends of an extreme, and if we could just embrace more romance in our media in the middle, that there might be a mushy middle option here of something that would create better content to read or watch or play. Lemon Lover goes, ooh, more Steam. Yep. The next article we have is ESP Rydo M2 Shot Trigger. So it'll be released for the PS4 and Switch in late 2019. This is a shoot 'em up game. I probably could have skipped over that. I've got probably a lot of just random things. Juice to cause some mech in your hands, but one. Alright. That. And that.
Converting stored energy.
And the turn. We have an article here from GameIndustry.biz. Xbox, we have a huge responsibility to a healthy gaming lifestyle. A platform holder discusses addiction, aggressive monetization, and its role in protecting gamers. It's good, I suppose, for the Xbox to do a PR campaign and say, you know what, we're not going to allow on our platform the worst cases of microtransactions and the worst cases of gambling or instances of games designed to make you play for a ridiculously long amount of time. Now, particularly as long as the game is bought for the Xbox, they don't care how long you play it. So that in itself is not something that would concern them. But I would say the Xbox has been just as guilty as PlayStation has been as far as embracing microtransactions. It was pretty much the Xbox 360 that embraced the idea of DLC and season passes and having to pay to play online. So the idea that they're the good guys is not realistic at all. But I suppose they're doing their PR. I could go on the rant again that there's no such thing as gaming addiction. You can't just make up an addiction and say that it exists. Sure, there's people with OCD tendencies. Those people would flip light switches up and down 1,000,000 times a day if they didn't have something else to do. So it doesn't make sense to try and label people as gaming addicts when really they just have OCD and should be treated for that. particularly when you know that people who have OCD will move what they act on around. So if you have OCD playing and you exert that OCD by playing video games, if you take away a video game console, well, then they'll probably just find something else that they're obsessive about, whether it's organizing shoes or plucking hair out of their head and counting the thread count of your carpet. The obsessive compulsive behavior does not disappear when you eliminate what they're expressing that behavior on at all. But the World Health Organization is trying to claim that there is this addiction, I think very much at the behest of countries like China, so that China can claim that a significant amount of their youth are gaming addicts and then put them in re-education camps effectively and concentration camps. So it is going to have a major detrimental effect compared to what it is. Xbox has been doing a lot of PR, like that accessibility controller that's not actually built by Microsoft, that they're promoting and pushing. They're doing a lot of PR to try to build goodwill towards the release of the Xbox 2. It's a good idea, and I wouldn't be surprised also if people within the PR department within Xbox are saying one thing to one crowd and saying something slightly different to other crowds. So depending on who they were talking to or who was interviewing them, they might say,
Job's done.
say, yes, we take this as a very important thing, but then they might be telling the game developers and the publishers, no, we really don't take it very carefully. I don't even know. Quite frankly, it's been a long time since I've played Xbox 360, and I've never played the Xbox One, but I don't know if there is even any kind of time limit options on Microsoft's hardware. So if you wanted to be a responsible parent and say, my kid can only play video games between certain hours for a certain amount of time on certain days, I don't know if you can really do that. It would be a nice feature, certainly, but that's really about all Microsoft could do. They can also restrict certain games that have too many microtransactions in them, but they really don't. The AAA games that are the worst offenders of having microtransactions still very much have gotten away with every bad thing they've ever done so far. They've been able to do it on the Xbox, on the Microsoft Xbox console, as much as they've been able to get away with doing it on the PlayStation console. So yeah.
Put this apple on your
And
head.
I don't know how hard it is to actually even get around a parental control, because there almost certainly is something in when you sign into Xbox Live where if you sign in with a child account, it can be restricted so that it won't allow them to play in rated M games. But I think last time I heard, it was pretty easy for a child, if they're smart enough, to just log in on the parent's account. Maybe there's a PIN code or something that they'd have to figure out or guess. But yeah, I don't think there's anything super too hard as far as avoiding parental lockouts. What I definitely do know is that there is no app that would show up an alert on your phone when somebody is playing M-rated game on Xbox Live, which is really what you would want to see, is just who's logged in, who's playing this game, and
To battle.
and yeah, things like that. Can you, if there was some kind of app where you could stop them from playing their game, if you could pause the game, if you could send a message to the person playing the game, like an app where there was just a come to dinner button for parents would be amazingly useful, where it just, you push the button on your phone, it paused their game and they couldn't unpause it, and it says your parents say come to dinner now, and they just have to come downstairs or come to the kitchen and eat dinner. That would solve a lot of fights. Of course, you can't pause online multiplayer games like Fortnite without the player losing, so your kids might be very upset about that too. Moving on, we have a story from Gamasutra. Heard is the word, developing a Pikmin inspired The Wild at Heart. So there's this new game that's been coming out called The Wild at Heart that looks like this, that's a little Pikmin inspired, although it doesn't look like Pikmin really. I guess it's somewhat around that concept. I guess it really does come down to what do the Pikmin do. I assume these are little Pikmin characters, and these are maybe two-player co-op controllable characters. And here's a circle, I assume, summoning these kind of characters. But are they going to pick up items and carry them back to the base? Because that would be the main gameplay loop that I would say would be make it a Pikmin inspired game. If it's just a minion control style game where you're just controlling smaller enemies to do something completely different, that's not very Pikmin inspired at that point. First game we have on Steam today is called Hell is Other Demons. It looks like it's a super challenging platform, shooting, fighting everybody in a small area. Kind of Smash Brothers with a gun, boss battle, hell game. There's a lot here. They say it's a side shooter, but what I'm not really seeing here is shooting on the side.
I must move quickly.
This doesn't look terrible. It does suffer a little dark screenshot syndrome, but it's probably not the kind of game I'd want to play either. It's $9.99. Need to play.
Converting stored energy.
And let's see, it supports a bunch of languages. Yeah, I feel like this game is too much Super Meat Boy for me. That you are just going to take a lot of damage and do a lot of stuff. Interestingly enough, this game apparently already has an 85 on Metacritic. So maybe it came out on some other platform first, because there's only 5 user reviews on it. It's from Congregate is publishing it. I'll be generous today and put it on the fall list. I don't think we're going to run into too much to talk about today, and frankly, after this game I probably should just move over to the European account, since we've already moved our way into we've already done the daily quests that we can do. More fallout from the Epic Games Store Mega Sale. 2K halts Borderlands 3 pre-orders during the Epic Games Mega Sale. Publisher says the decision is temporary and pre-orders made during the sale will be honored. So theoretically, if you pre-ordered Borderlands 3 during that time, you would have gotten $10 off, and I don't think there was really any other discounts applied for the mega sale, but maybe there was. The main thing here is that the money was coming from Epic, but it doesn't matter. 2K does not want their game that's not even out yet to be at a discount and lowering the price. So even if in this rare instance where Tim Sweeney and Epic Games was trying to do something that would be consumer friendly, clearly they don't have the clout and the coordination to get the publishers and the game developers to be on their side. And in a weird way, and I think this is just speculation on my part, but I think there's very possibly going to be a case to say that if Randy Pitchford, the CEO of Gearbox, is not invested in some way in Epic through some ownership of the company, he is clearly friends with Tim Sweeney and Epic and trying to make the Epic Store succeed, even against his own interest and his publisher's interest. So unfortunately, we have to talk about Randy Pitchford again for just a second to say he did put out a tweet promoting the Borderlands 3 was on sale, clearly not having discussed this at all with 2K, and then was forced to remove that tweet. Fortunately, that's all we have to say about Randy Pitchford as far as today, but still definitely not a good situation to be the CEO of a company and not be in direct and constant and consistent communication with your publisher of your major game that you're trying to make. But my speculation on that is it's not just that he's friends with Tim Sweeney and trying to promote the Epic Store, either because he wants to help him or because he possibly just hates Steam. My suspicion is that another lawsuit will involve him, and it will turn out that he actually has an investment with the Epic Store or a potential future investment. I suspect we may in a year or two hear that Gearbox is acquired by the Epic Store, or was in talks to be acquired by the Epic Store. Randy Pitchford, the reason it turns out that, and other people have confirmed that they saw Randy Pitchford push the voice actor of Claptrap. The reason why he pushed the voice actor of Claptrap in the lobby of a Marriott at GDC a few years ago, apparently was because that the voice actor of Claptrap was a high in the management, and should have been informed that Randy Pitchford at that time was in talks to sell Gearbox to another person, and he was doing it in secret for not a very clear reason, quite frankly. So the story as it's being portrayed is Randy Pitchford got caught in a lie and reacted violently by pushing the voice actor of Claptrap, who was like not a actual partner, but he was top level management and should have been involved in any conversations as far as talking about selling it. So if that is true, which all evidence seems to point that it is true, that he was in talks to sell it a year ago, I would not be surprised if we find out that Gearbox gets purchased by Epic in the next year or so also. And I also wouldn't be surprised if Randy Pitchford then gets a cushy job at Epic. Or I wouldn't be surprised if Randy Pitchford sold Gearbox to another company and to another person or entity, and then went to work for Epic. Any kind of future relationship here definitely colors his actions now in a different way from just being a promoter of the Epic Store to being potentially a conspirator to a potentially illegal but probably not action.
Reporting for duty. For justice.
Job's done.
Other games that were pulled were Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, which isn't out yet, Oxygen not included, which isn't out yet. Although it is also worth mentioning that I believe Oxygen not included may have violated certain
This would be a good time for
pricing laws in countries like Germany and maybe even in parts of the United States, because in their attempt to not lower the price of their game, they raise the base price of the game to leave the percentage to look the same, but that's illegal. So if you have a game and it's for sale, let's say for $100 to make the math easy, and then you put it on sale for 25% off, that would be $25, making it 75% off. But if you didn't like that and raised your price to roughly about $136, I would say, so that then 25% off of $136 would be slightly more than $100 or exactly $100 still. That's fraudulent advertising, that's fraudulent discounting, and that's not legal. So, and I'm not even gonna say that Oxygen Not Included did it intentionally. I think it's just straight up people don't know the law, even inside of moderate-sized corporations, particularly when you're talking about having to comply with worldwide pricing laws. But also, I imagine it shows a lack of coordination whatsoever as far as had they been given time to research this, they would have opted out clearly, and that's what they wanted to do, and that's what they were trying to do. They were just going about it the wrong way. There we go. So we got one victory, but I think we should just leave it at that and move over to the European account, because, you know, there's a chance that the European or Asian account will be a big pain in the butt. And I suppose if I just have a ridiculous amount of free time, I could go back and play the chapter 2 of the solo adventure. So we have extra things to do today, so as long as the stream doesn't go too long and I don't get tired, I could stretch out today's stream in quite a few different ways. Alright, we need to play Druid and then Priest. So Druid, do I want to play Ranked? Might as well. So this next game on Steam is a Chinese game, and I just wanted to point out this screenshot in particular. It's just, here you have what clearly is just stolen art assets from other games. Like, no one animator goes into such a variety of character drawings here. That's just not gonna happen, and the mismatch is just crazy. You've got a guy in a full suit and tie, well, a shirt and tie, and then a woman in a full clothing, and then two drastically different scaled bikini anime girls. It's just ridiculous low quality. English not being supported. It's $1.99 and it's Japanese only, so ooh, I guess I was wrong. It's not a cheap Chinese product, it's a cheap Japanese product. Seems odd, but apparently we're gonna start seeing more of that too. I guess this is what Steam Direct was always going to do for us, though, is it was going to create a world where more cheap bad products were available on Steam, and it in a weird way comes down to almost a balance of what harms society more: the one person not being able to try and sell their terrible game and get their voice out there, or all of society having to potentially hear or look at a bad game. And in the United States, at least until a few decades ago, the freedom of speech concept was sacrosanct, to the point where yes, a crazy person could stand on a soapbox and rant nonsense, and yes, that nonsense could be at least somewhat loud and disturb a lot more people that are around them, but freedom of speech was that important. So I look at the Steam Direct when I'm feeling generous, kind of like they are embracing freedom of speech and saying we are willing to let basically crazy game developers who we know have made terrible games put their games on Steam and try to sell them, and frankly their engine is good enough that most people don't see it. What you never hear is a complaint from an actual gamer saying the Steam front page is just full of garbage, because it never is. It's only people that are like me, that are looking at every single game that's coming out, that complain. Me and other video game journalists, basically. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Project Catharsis. This one looks a little too varied in what it is. It's a real-time strategy game, and it's lacking a little polish. It has 5 user reviews, and it's free to play, English only. It says here we have a negative review. Interesting idea that is poorly executed. Multiple crashes playing the game, including not being able to advance to the frozen tundra level. Cutscene plays, then the game freezes. So yeah, I don't think there's enough quality here, particularly since it's a free-to-play game. Okay. Here we have Gamma Sutra with the same article. 2K cuts off Borderlands 3 pre-orders on PC during the Epic Mega Sale. There's been no indication from the Epic Store that the Uplay bug has been fixed either. So even though the sale, I assume, is now over, you still cannot buy games on Uplay, any of the Ubisoft games. And that bug happened slightly before the sale happened and has yet to be fixed. So this is an interesting turn of events, but it does fall in line with how I feel Sony is going. Gamma Sutra has this next article. Sony launches PlayStation Productions to turn games into movies and TV shows. This is not super surprising. When you move the head office of Sony Interactive Entertainment, SEI or SIE, it gets turned around, I don't know why. When you move their head office to California, to Hollywood, basically, then yeah, everybody in California wants to be in the movies, and that seems like what they have clearly done here. And it also goes to show that Sony of Japan isn't really controlling anything because Sony Interactive Entertainment has now just launched its own subsidiary production studio called PlayStation Productions. And there's only a few movies, quite frankly, that you could make. Because this really is going to be more of a case of Sony or PlayStation Productions convincing other developers and publishers to let them take their games and turn them into movies while taking a cut. When most people, their game developers, if they wanted their games to be a movie, could sign those deals or license their games with bigger studios and more established studios for they could at least option the movie rights to people, and they do all the time. In fact, there was an instance of a game company going bankrupt. What was it? Echo? The game Echo. There's a movie being developed for that game, and the developer of the game is shut down, but the movie production is still going forward. So yeah, this happens all the time, and it to me, from my perspective, means that yeah, a lot of people that are working at Sony Interactive Entertainment did not want to be making video games or running a video game company. How does this really play into anything, though? Because if Sony Interactive Entertainment has this censorship board, which it can't be described as anything else, where they're censoring games more than the exact same games that would be coming out on the Switch, you'll get the exact same game completely uncensored on the Switch and censored on the PlayStation. If they're taking such a SJW puritanical view on things, they're going to take that exact same view on movies, and that's not a particularly good way to make a movie. You don't start with restrictions and limitations on what the artist can create or depict when making a movie. I wouldn't, at least. But this really does, at the very least, show that Sony of Japan is no longer in charge of PlayStation. And that only happened because they didn't care. And speaking of not caring, the more signs of weirdness happening at Sony. There is a report from Gamma Sutra that PlayStation staff were in the dark about the Sony and Microsoft team-up. Now, I said the reason why Sony and Microsoft were teaming up is because they wanted to use the Windows Azure product line, and they have like not even a contract but a gentleman's agreement to use the Windows Azure product line instead of the AWS Amazon warehouse and services for back-end server services, and basically from my perspective, is because they didn't want to work with Amazon. I didn't hear anybody else catch on to that. Maybe that's because I am follow enough information about what Microsoft has been trying to do instead of what Xbox has been trying to do. But yeah, the idea that the agreement between Sony and Microsoft is really going to change anything as far as how they do business with each other or compete against each other is really not that case. This is a very different agreement than what,
The Earth Mother was busy.
say, Nintendo and Microsoft are pushing for or pushing towards. Let's see. So what does this say? I'm trying to read this whole article and there's not even a chapter here. It's simply a sentence. But a report from Bloomberg suggests the staff at Sony's game division didn't know about the deal until the moment of the public announcement. Which is fine, frankly, because it doesn't really mean anything. All it means is if Sony had any first-party games in development, which I don't think it really does, and I can't honestly think when there last was a first-party Sony game, if ever. All it would mean is you would, for your back-end services, start to program for Microsoft Azure servers, which might be as simple as just loading a different library and using the exact same function calls. It might be easy copy and paste code changes. So yeah, why have a big staff meeting to say, hey, we're gonna partner with this company? People are certainly blowing this up to mean a lot more than it actually means. And I think it really doesn't mean much of anything. It's kind of a agreement that at some point in the future there will be an agreement. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Microsoft head of the Microsoft and Sony people got together, had a conversation for 5 minutes, agreed to work together, then took the picture and made the announcement in less than 20 minutes, because it's so up in the air that they really wouldn't have to commit to doing anything. I'm sure it's a non-binding agreement where either side could pull out at any time. Okay.
You're good. Job's done.
We have the same article again from Gamma Sutra. Xbox head commits to building a safe and inclusive game community. This is really just picking comments out of a speech, to quote mine. Well, I played Druid cards. Let's just play casual and see if we win. Because we might end early today, and if we do end early, I say this every time I stream, and it's never true, quite frankly, but if I could end early, maybe I'd jump back and play some more Doom. GameIndustry.biz has an article here. Red Dead Online's in-game poker is unavailable in certain regions. Despite no connection with real-world money, players in countries with strict gambling laws may not be able to access the minigame. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there might be a few countries out there where Red Dead Redemption is available for purchase or play, but it is illegal to gamble even in a virtual sense. But actually, there might not actually be any overlap there.
Hail, friend.
Because if you think about it, if there's some Saudi Arabian country where gambling is not illegal, or gambling is illegal, wouldn't it also probably be illegal to play a game where you can kill people and tie them up and rob them? And like the other actions in Red Dead Redemption are much worse from a logical stance. And the argument that it would be illegal to play pretend gambling and not illegal to play pretend murder is really silly. What does this do? Spoils. Yeah. Oops, I could have attacked. Like, this might, in all fairness, and this has happened a couple times, this might also be this article is coming from like a Reddit user, and we've seen this before through bad journalism and bad reporting, where people have said, oh yeah, this game is not allowed in Middle Eastern countries, but then it comes out that actually the game was never allowed in Middle Eastern countries, so it's just being completely misreported. And that is half of the fact that video game journalists are bad journalists, and it's half of the fact that a lot of Middle Eastern countries don't have a good system to announce what their laws are and what laws are being enforced and what laws aren't being enforced. And particularly Islamic countries where it might be a religious cleric determining and saying something is illegal, and just by the religious person saying it's illegal, it becomes illegal. So yeah, might be translation errors also, but it's just bad journalism. So I really wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that this entire article is slightly bunk, because
the Earth Mother was busy.
it's not actually true that there are actually no countries in which the online poker game is unavailable, in which also the entire game shouldn't be available. Although maybe it is also just Red Dead Redemption's Rockstar, the company blocking it in certain countries because they don't understand the laws. But that it is really a silly thing to do. It would be different if there's microtransactions or some actual gambling, but you're not even going through I don't even think you can buy more poker chips or money. Well, maybe you can. Maybe that's where it becomes a problem, is that maybe through 5 different steps you can buy items that are then other tradable for poker chips. I haven't played Red Dead Redemption, so I have no idea if that's the case. Trents. I'll summon some Trents. And play this.
For the wilds.
In the turn. Next we have a game on Steam called Otaku's Adventure. If you don't know what otaku means, it's a slightly, or at least originally was a slightly offensive description of people obsessed with manga or anime or figurines or nerd culture, but particularly Japanese nerd culture, since otaku is the Japanese word. It had a definite negative meaning originally in Japan. It got embraced in the 80s by people in the West to mostly focus around anime, and then it got eventually embraced as a positive thing by the people in
The Earth Mother was busy.
what am I trying to say? In Japan. So I think that's pretty much all you need to know. It is a descriptor, self-used descriptor to describe people that are extremely obsessed, like it's the only thing they do. This game, though, is just a low-effort game, probably trying to offend people, and some of the gameplay elements that are shown here look just like they're garbage. This is $5.99, and it's English and Chinese and Japanese. I seem to think here that this is probably getting some troll upvotes, and I just don't think that this is a game that would interest me. It's particularly trying to show otaku as creepy introverts and perverts, and that's always the slanderous depiction of an otaku, and not 100% inaccurate, but not 100% accurate either. There are definitely people who choose to use that descriptor, and it means something very different. Let's do this.
Back off!
Time waits for no one. Give that minion a turn. Give that minion a turn. Get ready. For the wild. Job done.
There you go. Yeah, I could probably go into an hour-long description of what otaku means and not be anywhere closer to what it really means, because it's almost a deeply personal description. Like, in the same way that being a nerd or a geek to me means something very different than what people who call themselves nerds or geeks these days means to them, because it's much more an accepted term. It's definitely not a counterculture to be a comic book nerd anymore like it used to be. I guess I'll just play this because I'm probably gonna lose.
Job's done.
And you know, words sometimes evolve and they have different definitions. Labels sometimes evolve and have different definitions. Eventually, hopefully you get more mature and old enough and realize you really don't need to describe yourself with any kind of words. You can just say, I am me and I like the things I like, and you can call me whatever you want, but I don't take on any of those labels. Boiling a human being down to a simplistic one-word description is not usually helpful. That's why progressive people created the term social justice warriors, is because it is an insult, and it is describing a group of people that are really just boiling themselves down to being outraged about everything and anything and falling into groupthink. And that's the same where the more recent descriptor of them, calling them NPCs, is the same thing as non-player characters, is that they repeat the same thing over and over again. Lemon Lover says, I know you're not a Nintendo man, Rydo, but Mario Maker 2, my goodness, does that look amazing. Well, I've been certainly at a crossroads with Nintendo for quite a while now. I haven't had anything since the Switch. Not the Switch, the Wii. I haven't had a Nintendo console since the Wii. But I was very much a Nintendo player in my youth. But it is, as a YouTuber, impossible to cover Nintendo content without Nintendo of Japan claiming copyright on it. So, yeah, I don't cover Nintendo games, and that's why most YouTubers don't cover Nintendo games. For that one reason. Mario Maker 2 does look good. I will fully agree with you, Lemon Lover. I haven't seen enough detail to be 100% certain that it adds enough content to be justified as the sequel to Mario Maker 1 and then not just a patch to Mario Maker 1. But there is a single player experience of like hand-selected levels. I think it's 100 hand-selected levels that you're supposed to play through, then act as a tutorial mode. I imagine Mario Maker 2 is still going to have a pretty bad system as far as finding other people's levels and sharing your levels. But yeah, it looks good, and I don't have a lot bad to say about Nintendo games. Their games, their first party games, are usually great, and if I was a person who had infinite time and infinite money, I would buy a Switch and I would play a lot of their Nintendo first party games, but I wouldn't be able to cover any of it. But yeah, I in no way hate Nintendo's quality of products. I just hate their copyright enforcement on Japan from Nintendo Japan. We have Sin Chicho Honda says Hearthstone, is it dying because of Magic Arena? I don't know if Hearthstone is really dying because of Magic Arena. I would say no, if you're asking. That is not the reason why Hearthstone is dying. Hearthstone is dying because it is killing itself, if anything. It's a 4 to 5 year old game. It hasn't added a lot. What kills it is that you spend 30 minutes playing a game and then you have maybe a 50% win ratio if you're lucky.
I want you, and you.
The game is too slow, but I don't think Magic Arena is any faster. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if a single game of Magic in Magic Arena is much longer than playing Hearthstone. But yeah, what's killing Hearthstone is just little nerfs. They're going to nerf some more cards and little changes, and just a lack of generally focusing on improving the quality and having interesting new cards and new expansions and new gameplay methods. And it's just getting old, and Activision Blizzard is falling apart, so I would not be surprised if Activision Blizzard goes into bankruptcy, and then
Thank you.
and then Blizzard splits off, and then maybe Blizzard maybe at that point could turn it around and focus on trying to improve Hearthstone. It's a very slow dying process, to say the least. Wasn't I supposed to win a game with the Druid and Hunter? Why did that not count? I just won a game with the Hunter, with the Druid. I just freaking won a game with the Druid and it didn't count. let's see, what's the other daily quest? Priest? Let's try the priest. I think Magic Arena isn't something, because I've certainly thought about jumping over to Magic Arena, and it's just not something that I think I would want to do, because I think it would just slow down the game. Now, the person in charge of Hearthstone, Ben Brode, has left Blizzard and made a company called Second Dinner. They've got a partner with Marvel to do a Marvel card game, so the Marvel characters, superheroes, in a card game fashion probably would be more interesting to a lot more people. Hearthstone is all around World of Warcraft players, and even though World of Warcraft at one time at least was the biggest game on the planet, it's still not as accessible, I think, as the Marvel games are. So as long as Ben Brode can get that Marvel game out, maybe I would think about jumping over or jumping ship. But it's hard to do that too, because I've got like nearly a complete collection on Hearthstone, and I would, if I abandon Hearthstone, I lose a lot of progress that I've made. So there is this sunk cost fallacy built into it. But I would definitely consider jumping over to the Marvel game, whereas I don't think I would jump over to Magic the Gathering Arena, particularly since Magic has had a bad run so far of having digital versions of their game not be top quality. Because the previous Magic the Gathering games weren't good. I also thought about playing Gwent, I also thought about playing Artifact, and neither one of those turned out to be super popular. So it would probably need to be a year of just massive success as far as Magic Arena before I would be willing to jump over to it. I also feel like Magic is more complicated a game. It's just a much older game. I've played it before, but when I played it was like in Ice Age, which is years and years ago, so that's it's probably changed quite a bit. Let's see. Lemon Lover says, I've heard a lot about how they've lightened up on YouTube coverage, though, in the past few months at least. Talking about Nintendo. I just can't risk it. Like, the truth of the matter is, if they claim something once, they're going to claim it multiple times to they're potentially going to claim it multiple times. So, or they might lighten up now, but they might change their mood later. What I look at as a metric in particular is when you look at Giant Bomb and when they're playing Mario Party or a Nintendo game, they are doing that on their own private subscription service and not on YouTube. So maybe Nintendo has lightened up, but they're not 100% there, and they're not 100% trustworthy. Also, I have no clue. Like, it would probably be $500 to get a Switch and a few games, and then another $500 to get a device that could capture the HDMI output to play those games. And yeah, if you start seeing a significant amount of big YouTubers playing Nintendo games, then that would probably be the point to recognize and realize that they've started to be a lot more generous. But yeah, right now I don't see a lot of people doing that, and there would definitely be footage if that was the case. Meanwhile, also my Steam account, like I have so many games on Steam, it would be quite a betrayal to jump from a Steam account that has a lot of games that I haven't played, like hundreds upon hundreds of games I haven't played, to then jump to something newer. I also would say my experiments with my budget, running this as trying to run this as a business but not really making any money at all. There's zero income coming in. There hasn't been any income coming in since at least the beginning of the year, when they kicked everybody out of the YouTube partner program who had less than 1,000 subscribers. Looking at the budget, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to play new games at all. Like, and that's why probably in part my YouTube channel doesn't get a lot of views, is because I'm not spending money to play the brand new thing at the exact second that it comes out and is playable. Let's see, like, and that's been nice because it also means that I haven't bought, like, the most recent AAA game to come out was Rage 2. Looking at the reviews of Rage 2, it's not really anything more than a medium average game. So had I spent $80 to pre-order that and play that day one, I probably wouldn't get much coverage out of it. Not too many people would have really watched it. And this is something that's just been consistent for every time I've looked at it. Playing the brand new games only makes sense if you're somebody like PewDiePie, who is making at least $100 in ad revenue to play and stream the $100 game. And PewDiePie's probably making a lot more than $100 in ad revenue for one stream or one video, but I'm not. Boogie2998 talked about this, and he was talking about he would do these Francis videos where he plays a character named Francis who would break things and act frankly retarded. But he was talking about how every time he made a Francis video on YouTube, and the reason why he doesn't do it anymore is because it would get immediately demonetized, and in most of the Francis videos he made, he would be breaking a $100 Xbox or something along that line. So it was costing him $100 to lose subscribers and get demonetized and not get any views. Why does this thing have Wind Fury? Oh, it doesn't. It just can attack twice after it kills a minion. So yeah, I'm mostly happy playing slightly older games. Playing the 2016 Doom, like, sure, it's 3 years old, but I definitely didn't pay $60 for it either, and I'm kind of happy I didn't pay $60 for it, because, you know, I'm really was ever going to only play the single player experience and never play the multiplayer experience. So if I got it for like $20, that would be a much better offering for me. And being such a small YouTuber, even if I would played it on day one, people still wouldn't see the views. And I see that particularly in Hearthstone. If I can get a Hearthstone video out talking about a new expansion, it does get more views, but it certainly doesn't get me thousands upon thousands of more views. It gets me like 5 to 10 more views. Well, that daily quest was done easily. which maybe it's making up for the fact that it didn't give me a victory when I played with Druid. So let's try to play with Hunter. Next article is TechRaptor saying the same thing. PlayStation team caught off guard by Sony's deal with Microsoft. A lot of the same reporting. The other thing about Sony, and this really goes to show how Sony is very, very divided. Sony Music Entertainment, another subsidiary, has decided that through their publishing label, they will be making video games. So instead of Sony Interactive Entertainment making video games, it's Sony Music. This is something that's not brand new, however, but it's weird nonetheless, because you have different divisions of Sony not cooperating with each other, not coordinating with anything with each other. And I believe the head of Sony recently changed about a year ago, and part of the hope in that change was that they would increase the level of cooperation between the different departments. But that doesn't seem like that's happening. So Hearthstone, far too early in my opinion, has put out a tweet. Upcoming card balance update, May 22nd, 2019. Let's see. Here's after evaluating data, blah blah blah, blah blah blah, just tell us to change. Alright. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this so we can see that a little bit better. Okay. And play. And
quickly.
Okay. Alright. So the upcoming card changes. Evil Miscreant, who I believe is from Rise of the Shadows, is changing from a 3/1/5 to a 3 mana 1 attack 4 health. So it's getting nerfed from 5 health to 4 health. And this is a brand new card. And I knew there was a lot of power creep in Rise of the Shadows, but it is crazy that they're changing it so quickly from the expansion coming out. They clearly hated the way they were almost immediately, and maybe just didn't have time to fix it. Maybe they rushed out this expansion. That could have been very much the case. This is something certainly that feels like Ben Brode would have not allowed this to happen, because this is where people in card games get pissed off, is you just bought packs. You just spent real world money to get these cards under a certain description, and now these cards are being nerfed. And these aren't old cards that went into Wild. I would say Wild in particular is a major factor of why Hearthstone is dying also, is the fact that so many old cards are just not playable anymore. There's more cards in Wild than there are in standard play. The next mod we have is a 3 mana spell for Raiding Party. Draw 2 pirates from your deck with combo add a weapon. It now costs 4 mana but does the same thing. So another nerf. Preparation is an old card, so this is probably going to get nerfed. But because these are getting nerfed and changed, I wouldn't be surprised if there's any compensation whatsoever. I wouldn't be surprised if this just changes completely. I feel like Preparation in particular had been nerfed already, but I could be wrong about that. So this was a 0 mana spell. The next spell you cast costs 3 less. Now it's a 0 mana spell. Next spell you cast this turn costs 2 less. Again, nerfed. Nothing is getting more powerful by any means. Let's play over here for a second. Next we have a legendary card, an 8 mana, 7 attack, 7 health card called the Archivist Illistana. Battlecry, draw 5 cards, replace your deck with 2 copies of each. It's now 9 mana instead of 8 mana, but does the same thing. Alright. So, it says, as with these previous card changes, once these changes are live, players will be able to disenchant the updated cards for their full arcane dust value for 2 weeks. So, if you have these cards, you should hold on to them when they get nerfed, and then you should disenchant them, and then I don't know if that really changes anything though. Like, you could disenchant them for the full dust now and never create them again. That's pretty much all you can do. So if you hate these cards now and aren't going to play with them, you disenchant them. But if you were ever planning to play with them, it doesn't really do any change much. It is just way too early to be putting out nerfs. We're not even at the expansion.
Follow the rules.
We're not even done with the solo adventure, and they're putting out nerfs. I guess it makes sense to craft these cards. Might have to do some research, but I'm not exactly sure why it makes sense. So I can't even tell you why. If I did this, I can only do it once. If I did that, I can only do it once.
Job's done.
Next we have a game on Steam. The Elder Scrolls Online Elsewhere is now available as a DLC upgrade for $39.99. So, I suppose you would have to actually spend $80 to get the base game and this. I wish they would stop working on the Elder Scrolls Online and put more effort on working on the next actual Elder Scrolls games. I really don't get the idea that the Elder Scrolls as the Elder Scrolls Online is anywhere as successful as something like World of Warcraft. You can see it's 75%, 76% popular. So people who are playing it are mostly having a fun time. I guess the hardcore Elder Scrolls fans are probably having a fun time with it, but personally, I think a lot more fans of Skyrim exist out there that will never touch an online element. I suppose it is also worth mentioning that Skyrim Together mod apparently disappeared and reappeared, and one of the developers claimed they were getting death threats against themselves, which is the standard claim it's a standard claim online nowadays, is that somebody was harassing me, somebody was threatening my life, and that's why I disappeared. Because there was certainly some stuff that came out with the developers in that mod that showed that they probably weren't trustworthy, and you probably shouldn't be supporting their Patreon, and you shouldn't be holding your breath that this mod would ever come out and work. It is kind of silly too to want a Skyrim multiplayer mod when Skyrim Online exists, or the Elder Scrolls Online exists, and you'd get more content there. But I guess maybe the idea is that Skyrim is still better than Elder Scrolls Online. This is a surprising story from TechRaptor. Reports are emerging that Nippon Ichi, or Japan 1, is in financial woes and unable to pay staff. It's not very well heard of that a Japanese company is in financial trouble, and it's not very well heard that they would have trouble paying their staff. That is something that, you know, when you go with the Japanese honor thing, it's pretty dishonorable to not be able to pay your staff. And if you were the CEO of a company like that, you probably prefer to jump off the top of the building literally than admit that you ran the company into the ground, or you would just go to the Yakuza and borrow money. And I wouldn't see any reason why the mob would not be willing to take a great percentage of your company over. So the story goes, according to Twitter sources user HD Kirin, Nippon Ichi Software, a Japanese studio that's been active in the industry since the mid-90s and most famous for the Disgaea and Marl Kingdom tactical RPG series, is currently facing financial issues. HD Kirin also reported that according to a Japanese source, the studio is unable to pay the salaries of its employees and has now resorted to a moving strike warrant as a last resort to keep the studio afloat. I don't know what a moving strike warrant is. That's 3 words that don't make any sense. This guy is popular and successful, so I don't know how you don't just assume that they are running their company into the ground by terrible mismanagement. The article continues, the company's financial troubles are not exactly recent. It has been struggling for quite some time due to poor sales of their games in Japan. Oh, maybe it isn't as successful as I thought it was. Following the release of their latest mobile game titled Disgaea RPG, which had its own technical issues, the company is now unable to meet payroll. Therefore, in order to raise capital required to pay for the development staff's labor costs, the company has resorted to a stock market measure called moving strike warrant, which is a method of raising funds that cannot be acquired through the usual options, such as borrowing from banks or investors. This happens when a company already has a deficit. Nippon Ichi now has to sell its stocks at a lower price in order to raise the staff's payroll costs, but since the stocks will decline in value in the long term, as a consequence, the company's investors will also be affected by the measure. So we might very well see a new company in charge of Nippon Ichi at that point. It seems like they're effectively opening themselves up to a hostile takeover by having to sell more shares of their more stocks of their company. It's not 100% unheard of companies not doing amazingly well financially in Japan. The the anime industry in particular is always underpaying their staff because they don't make enough money. I think a lot of that is just, again, a lack of efficient production in budgeting. There is also a major factor of almost all business and all people live in Tokyo, which is way too expensive. It's the equivalent of if 80% of everybody in the United States lived in New York City and was paying the rent and for the expense of living in New York City, if they just had more suburban offices and had more things happening in other cities in Japan instead of being so central and squished together where it's way too expensive to live. They could probably reduce the production costs quite a bit that way.
I made sure nobody
But video
stole
game
your
companies in particular don't tend to have that as a problem. It's more anime companies that will make these limited liability corporations that are just designed to make one anime, and then when it doesn't make enough money it shuts down, and everybody gets paid but it doesn't stay in business. Maybe investors don't get paid. So I guess we're gonna have to play a little shaman to play overload cards, and then we're gonna have to win druid and rogue, and that's gonna be kind of hard. So let's see what this shaman deck is. Should have just looked at it though, instead of just jumping into a game. Next we have a story, GameIndustry.biz. PlayStack makes a PC console move with a Doctor Who VR game. The smartphone specialist has signed 3 other PC console games. A Doctor Who VR game might be interesting. It's called Doctor Who: The Edge of Time. But in all honesty, there's 2 or 3 previous Doctor Who games that aren't good quality. I think maybe you're getting into a difficult area where you're running into too much canon when you try to make a Doctor Who game, because you almost have to have something with the Daleks and the Cybermen and probably the Master and several other alien species. You have to write the character so that it actually feels like at least one of the characters in Doctor Who. I guess the most recent VR game also would be either the next Doctor Who, who's replacing, was it Jodie Whittaker that was the female Doctor Who for one season? Or it's going to be that female Doctor. And nobody liked that female Doctor, generally speaking, because she didn't like doing it either. I think mostly it was just a poorly written season. And Jodie Whittaker could have done a much better job if she was given better directing and better writing. So, yeah, Doctor Who has been in a decline in my mind since Matt Smith left, and I don't think you can do too much to fix it other than put it on the shelf, give it some time to rest, reevaluate the differences between what BBC wants it to be, which is a kid's show, which is kind of what it sort of was originally, and what it probably should be, which is something closer to an HBO show for adults. Doctor Who should be a adult running drama that is possibly slightly kid friendly. It doesn't need to be Game of Thrones or anything, but it should not be ever focused on being kid friendly. Let's see. Silence a minion. Deal 1 damage to it. And deal 1 damage to all minions. Can't do that. Oh, I screwed that up. So yeah, maybe. But then a Doctor Who in VR game also would be incredibly short and limited as far as what you can do. And frankly, a Doctor Who game probably can only be like a Telltale game anyways. Because if you do anything else, it's going to put too much control in the hands of the player, when Doctor Who should be the person who's doing all the clever things, and you can't play as Doctor Who to do all the clever things, because then that would require there to be no clever writing, or very little clever writing. Moving on, this game caught my eye. TechRaptor has an article. Horror survival title Folia Dear Father is coming out this fall. And from the screenshot, this looks like a hyper-realistic, good-looking game. That being said, it's... Ooh, this is pretty gross. The problem is a horror asset jump scare game like this does not really look much different from what I'm seeing here as I'm jumping around. So anytime I see a horror game like this, I can put it on the follow list and see if people really like it. Most of the time people don't. Let's see. Is this the same developer who made Hatred?
There is little time.
Yeah, it's from the same developer that made Hatred. Interesting. So it probably isn't going to be good, because Hatred wasn't actually good. And it sold on this controversy. Didn't move fast enough. Interesting. So yeah, Hatred eventually got good reviews, but I would say it's not really worth playing. And selling itself on controversy, I always thought was a sleazy thing to do. Alright, if people would stop conceding so quickly, I would be able to play these cards. Next we have a story from TechRaptor. Call of Duty 2020 is going to be a new Black Ops game developed by Treyarch. Never played any of the Call of Duty games, but I imagine fans of the Call of Duty games might find this interesting and get excited. You probably don't want to be too excited, because isn't this still EA? And when they say Treyarch is developing it, is it really the same Treyarch who made the previous game that Treyarch made that people would be excited about? Because people have just moved around so much in every company that no studio is the same studio it was 4 years ago. But yeah, I guess there's a little bit to be hyped about. Let's see. Well, okay. Let's see, is this game I need to talk about on Steam at all? Nah. Well, we'll talk about it for a second. We have another Eastern game called Super Welder here that looks like a single screen Unity game with a gradient background. We haven't seen Eastern games go this route, though, making single screen Unity puzzle games. It's $1.79 discounted. Seems to support quite a few languages. I would be okay, frankly, if there was more variety, particularly from Eastern developers, low effort developers. Better that we have a variety of bad games to talk about every week than the exact same 100 visual novels that we are mostly getting these days, because that is mostly what we're getting. See, next we have a Gamma Sutra article. Marvel and the Pokemon Company partner with NetEase to launch games in China. So, these I assume are to bring. Marvel is gonna bring over comic book and movie, video games, and TV series and comic books. I'm a little surprised Marvel hadn't already done that. And as for Pokemon, we'll release localized versions of Pokemon Quest in China. Yeah, I'm a little surprised Pokemon Company hasn't done that also. But every time you see a story like this, it's not like they want to partner with NetEase, it's that the Chinese government forces them to partner with a local Chinese company to sell their products, which they could sell themselves just fine. And so you literally are giving your intellectual property and a cut of your earnings to a Chinese company for no reason, because of, well, nationalism, Chinese nationalism, and lack of embracing capitalism, for as disgusting as that concept can often be. Gamatsu has the same article, report 2020 do Call of Duty is Call of Duty Black Ops by Treyarch. So maybe there was some more information that confirmed this, or maybe not. Apparently Gamatsu is also using tags now. They've changed their website. Battlecry minion. Let's see. Wind Fury. Is there something I could give Wind Fury to?
Come, my pretty birds.
Squirrels. Why is this considered a lackey?
Do I have to?
Let's see. Next we have an article from Gamatsu. THQ Nordic teases in E3 2019 announcements the long-awaited return of a galactically beloved game and a new vision of a beloved game. So, what was the name of this game? Area 51? Let's see. It could be... So there's two games that they've teased. So it could be Destroy All Humans, probably, and it also could be Time Splitters, Kingdoms of Amalur, or Alone in the Dark. The thing I would take though from THQ Nordic is if they were going to do anything right, they would have done Darksiders 3 correct, and the fact that they didn't gives me very little faith that any of their products will ever be of any real quality. I don't think I can win this, but I can play cards certainly. Yeah. Yeah, I think we could easily go 8 more years before we see THQ Nordic release anything of any interest that is actually quality, and then I wouldn't also be surprised if THQ Nordic falls apart again, just like the original THQ, because they're going down the exact same route of over licensing games, over developing games, and not focusing on making a good product at first and foremost.
The taunt is in the way.
Yeah, I can't do anything. Next, we have a game on Steam called Kaizo, K-A-I-S-U-O. I assume that's how that's pronounced. It's a little dark screenshot syndrome. Is it a? It's an adventure VR game in what looks like a Japanese ancient city, although it has electronics, so I don't know what it is. It requires VR, but it's free, so it's some kind of surreal adventure. Well, I guess for people out there that have VR, I'd say check this out. And honestly, I'd probably put this on my follow list too if I ever do get VR. I'd be willing to look at this. It would only take me some time. It looks like it's mostly a puzzle game about opening a Chinese puzzle box if I read the description over here. Okay. That doesn't sound terrible. Puzzle boxes, Chinese or Japanese puzzle boxes, are extremely expensive custom-made devices, so owning one for real is very prohibitively expensive. So yeah, I could see.
I don't have enough mana.
Yeah, I could definitely see going around and playing Kaizo. That being said, it might also be extremely boring and bad.
I bring life.
Next, we have a game on Steam that's just a couple Asian characters, and let's see what it looks like. I don't know if this. It says it's an RPG adventure with gore and violence, so I assume it's some kind of horror game. But the screenshots aren't even loading. And yeah, this does just seem like a horror game to me. Kind of a very Chinese-centric horror game. But I'm not even seeing any jump scares or anything, so I don't know how scary it actually is. Yeah, I see no creatures or enemies or anything. English not supported. It's called Old Days apparently. It's $2.79 and it's Chinese only. This actually doesn't look terrible compared to the other asset flip low effort games. Perhaps it's because they more focused on covering Chinese specific assets instead of just a generic creepy hospital assets. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Overwatch Anniversary 2019 date announced. Overwatch Workshop may be going live. So I imagine a workshop would mean you can add mods to the game through some system. So yeah, this is kind of an announcement of an announcement. The anniversary event is May 21st. What's today, by the way? So tomorrow, tomorrow the anniversary will happen. I think Overwatch still has its fan base. I don't think its fan base is particularly growing as much as they might like it to, but it still seems to work. Alright, now I need to find some Druid and Rogue victories, and that might be easier than it would seem. Actually, let's just play ranked to make it a little bit more difficult so I can go through the news. Gamatsu has an article, the Shoot 'em Up Cotton reboot has been announced for the PS4, Switch, and PC. Cotton apparently is a 1991 arcade title, witch flying on a broomstick in a shoot 'em up game. Let's see if there's any images that the gallery has that would show some gameplay. Sure does look like a 1990s game. Well, that shows the gameplay, but I don't... So yeah, it's a side-scrolling shooter game that must have had some amount of success if they're making a reboot. Although, frankly, at this point, even the most mediocre game is getting a reboot nowadays. People have run out of ideas and gotten desperate.
Job done.
Next, we have a game on Steam called It Could Have Been Me, which seems to be a 26 documentary stories and 6 surreal worlds in VR. So it's a trip between Afghanistan to Sweden. What I'm seeing here, though, looks really just like garbage. And English is not supported. And it requires VR. And it's $2.99. Full audio English, but English is not supported. So this looks like a garbage game, almost certainly. I don't see how you can't assume that when the website that you're selling on it has it labeled horribly, when you have it severely underpriced for a VR game, when the screenshots look terrible. Next, we have another game on Steam that probably should have raised a red flag, quite frankly, called Homicide. I think if you're going to name a game something like that, you probably should get some extra looking at. That being said, this doesn't seem like as much a game where you're killing people as much as it's a game from first person perspective who's trying to find the body. Then he's trying to find 5 clues scattered around the scene. This feels like this is a find the 5 pages style game where it's just going to randomly put things and not very good quality. The idea, though, if expanded on, might be interesting. If you were a crime scene investigator, CSI, then at a homicide location and you were looking for clues, that would be slightly interesting. There were some CSI games, I covered one of them, but there's not enough polish on this game to make me believe that it's going to be a good product.
Double time and double pay.
Job done.
And on top of that, this game, Homicide, is $1.99 and English is not supported. It's just a Chinese game. A cheap Chinese asset flip. But we are getting more variety as far as cheap Chinese asset flips. They are going in different directions. So that's interesting, to say the least. TechRaptor has an article here. Bethesda outlines the future of Elder Scrolls Blades in the first Blades Town Hall. I believe Blades was in early access. I'm not sure it's not still in early access. Yeah, Bethesda's early access for Elder Scrolls Blade is fully underway, with everyone available to join and play. And so they had this town hall video where they're talking about it. Elder Scrolls Blades, from what I can tell, is not a very interesting or detailed or very good game, even for a mobile game.
Desperate seas I roam. Let me go home.
So, knowing that, or making that assumption, I'm gonna have to do a lot of damage here, I guess. I'm not particularly interested to see Elder Scrolls Blade succeed. It's a mobile game for cell phones when really you don't want to see Bethesda working on cell phone games at all. And the fact that they have so many in development really is a problem.
I fight.
Next story we have TechRaptor. World of Warcraft Classic players are mixing up features for bugs. I heard from someone who played World of Warcraft quite a lot that World of Warcraft Classic is slightly interesting, but also not going to be a big sell for anybody who hadn't played World of Warcraft a lot before. And there is still a lot of questions up in the air and a lot of simplicity in World of Warcraft Classic compared to how, I suppose the word would be, complicated World of Warcraft eventually became.
Here we go.
I would take from it, or what I did take from it, is it seems like World of Warcraft Classic reminds everybody that it was too simplistic at the beginning, and regular World of Warcraft reminds everybody that it's too complicated still. So there's no happy middle ground, and I don't feel like somebody who would want to jump into regular World of Warcraft would have a good experience playing Classic and to experience the old expansions and the old stories. Really, there should just be like a very accelerated single player experience built into modern World of Warcraft so that you can understand how the game is played but quickly move towards being at the same level of understanding and capability as your average World of Warcraft player is.
Here we go.
But as for the story, Blizzard has released a not a bug list for the upcoming World of Warcraft Classic. Closed beta testing for the game started on Wednesday last week. There's this is going to be a weird release, certainly, with World of Warcraft Classic, because they're only going up to, I believe, the next Rammus expansion, and then I have no idea what happens at that point, whether it restarts or whether it just stays at next Rammus, or whether there's a way to, at that point, transition your character to regular World of Warcraft. And I don't know if they're ever going to go past Nyxramus, and I'm really not talking from a position of authority or understanding, even saying that much, because I really don't know World of Warcraft. I know Nyxramus from Hearthstone more than I know it from World of Warcraft. So I'll just leave it at that. It seems like if you are interested in playing World of Warcraft Classic, you probably are going to need to do a lot of research to make sure you're actually interested in playing it, and you still probably would be disappointed. Just be happy you have the memories of the old game, I would say, and just move forward. Next we have a game on Steam called Amortize Off-Road, which looks like it's an off-road game. Kinda asset flippy. It's not really polished enough for a race or for a car game. They want $11.99 with no discount. It's English only as far as the language. Not that that would probably be a problem. Yeah, this feels too asset flippy and just unpolished. And it doesn't seem like there's any real levels or challenges on it. It just seems like you'd be driving around random areas. Which, that probably kills the fun of off-roading quite a bit, to be doing it in virtual reality, when you would much prefer to be playing it in off-roading in reality if you're into off-roading. Here's that article I mentioned before from TechRaptor. Sony Music Entertainment will be announcing games at E3.
I must protect the wild.
So the funny thing about this is the label of Sony Music Entertainment is completely independent of Sony Interactive Entertainment and can publish games on different platforms. So I wouldn't be surprised if Sony Music does come out with a game that shows up on the Switch or the Xbox or PC. But it would also be kind of silly to think that Sony Music Entertainment is going to publish any game that isn't just a music-based game, and that they would publish anything that would be so successful that Sony Interactive and PlayStation would get shut down just because the game publishing was way more successful. There is also, as a YouTuber, some danger in trying to cover any kind of game that is owned by Sony Music, because I'm sure it would be full of Sony music that they would Content ID and claim. So yeah, that is true for any music game, certainly, but certainly I wouldn't trust Sony Music any more than I would trust any other music company. Some are worse than others. Let's see.
Time waits for no one.
Gamatsu has an article here. Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, the Black Order of Hawkeye gameplay. So Marvel Alliance Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, the Black Order, is due out for the Switch on July 19th. I'm surprised the Marvel Alliance series still has succeeded, but I guess that's the power of Marvel. I remember trying to play Marvel Alliance 1, and it was clunky controls, if I recall correctly. Not a very good experience.
Double time and double
Time waits for no one.
Next, Gamatsu has an article. Hot Gimmick Axis Jong is coming to Switch, which is a game that first launched for the PS2 on April 2005 in Japan. Let's see, another Hot Gimmick and Hot Gimmick Cosplay Jong are already available for the Switch. I'm not sure if these came to the West though. Let's see. What kind of game is this? Seems like it's might be a little bit cheesecakey, you know, a little lewd, but I have no idea. I haven't heard of this game. I guess it's not on PC, so I'll have to maybe do some research on Hot Gimmick. Well, that's one victory. We need 2 more. Yeah, and we're getting a lot of Japanese announcements for Japanese-only games on the Switch or the PlayStation 4. More of that has to do with E3 coming up. Everything will be slightly different for a week or so, and then I wouldn't be surprised if it gets quiet for another few weeks after E3 happens.
Watch your back.
Which, that is a prime example of E3 sucking all the oxygen out of the room as far as like having a conversation about other games being announced or coming out. Gamatsu has an article, Strikers 2020 announced. Let's see. I have no idea what Strikers 2020 is. I think it's a soccer game, but we're not getting too much information. New entries in the Strikers shoot 'em up series. I guess it's a shoot 'em up series. Okay. So it's an announcement from a Japanese company. Even if it did have a release date, believing that release date right now would be silly because they always delay their games, or almost always delay their games. Next we have a game called Redurgy Swag, launches June 13th for Switch in Japan. Again, they almost always delay their release date. Let's see. It's another shoot 'em up, so it must be shoot 'em up season in Japan. That being said, it seems like there's some conversation that happens in between the shoot 'em up levels. This doesn't look particularly interesting or good quality. But I guess that's easily to be expected.
Here we go.
Too, if you're gonna make a low effort game, a shoot 'em up is pretty much your first bet. Next, I wanted to point out this game because this is rather interesting. This game is called Dead Castle and has a bunch of Asian characters after it. It is $7.19 discounted, and it's English and simplified Chinese. However, if you look at this knight character, if you look at the general gameplay, if you look at the weapons, these are art assets that are absolutely 100% stolen from Rogue Legacy. I don't have to say allegedly. I don't really feel the need to have to say that they licensed the artwork from Rogue Legacy. No, this is just somebody stole the art assets from Rogue Legacy, and they're trying to sell this game as a hardcore Rogue Legacy continuation, but this is not the same developer. And it is surprising that this has been here even a few days since this came out on May 17th, and it hasn't been caught yet. But maybe I'll tweet this out to the guy. Actually, you know what? Let's do a good deed and let's tweet this out to the developer of Rogue Legacy at the end of this. Well, after the stream is over, I'll tweet this out and say, hey, this guy, check this out. Or I'll say you should look at this. I got another victory over here. So one more victory and 2 more spells and we'll be done. And I only have about 12 or 15 more articles. I wanted to follow up. Last stream I talked about WinCE and how it was on Pocket PCs and there were games on Pocket PC. Apparently, unbeknownst to me, WinCE was also ported to the Dreamcast, and that's where this emulator running WinCE compatibility is coming from. So there was quite a few games here. Here's the compatibility list, not all of which are playable, of games that were ported to the Dreamcast using Windows CE. So I wouldn't be surprised if that does mean if you had another WinCE game, you could probably, with a lot of work, get it to run using the recast WinCE Libretro experimental core. But I was slightly inaccurate, pretty inaccurate, when I was saying this was to run games that ran on the Pocket PC particularly. It's designed to run games that are running on the WinCE engine on the Dreamcast. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam here called Miss Cat, which seems to be a game where you just wander around and walk. Seems like there's no enemies or anything to do. It's early access. English is not supported. It's 99 cents and it's simplified Chinese, so this is seemingly another cheap Chinese game. That does remind me, however, Lorelei, the third in the Cat Lady series, which perhaps the first game in the Cat Lady series is Downfall. I don't know. From what I understood, you were supposed to play the Cat Lady, then Downfall, the remastered Downfall game, and then you're supposed to play Lorelei. But some people would have played Downfall first in the non-remastered version because that was the first one to come out. Seriously, these guys are not giving me enough time to cast spells. Alright. Well, this, and we'll play this. But yes, Lorelei is out there, and from what I hear, it's good. I didn't want to spoil myself too much on it, though, so.
Uther versus Lunara.
The forest fights
Next, we have a game here called Nystagmus, which seems like an adventure game. Maybe it's an asset flip game. Suffering from dark screenshot syndrome, certainly. So, I mean, all I can really judge it by is this screenshot. Yeah, this feels like it's just trying to steal some of the concepts from BioShock with the lighthouse. It's $1.19 discounted. And it's English and simplified Chinese. It doesn't look like it's quality enough to be something I want to play. Right. So I'll just play this first turn, and then that'll be the spell I need to play. TechRaptor has the same story. Updated Epic Chaos continues as Borderlands 3 gets removed from the Epic Mega Game Sale. The update is publisher 2K Games has responded to tell us why Borderlands 3 is no longer for sale with a comment that matches what Clay and Paradox said. The representative told us, "We were working closely with Epic and have temporarily removed Borderlands from the storefront. We're looking forward to bringing the game back to the Epic Store soon. Games bought during the mega sale will be honored at that price." Which, I suppose, they don't want to get into lawsuits, so they're going to honor any sale there, but they are certainly not happy about the way the store sale happened. And it really does feel like Tim Sweeney or somebody at Epic just decided, hey, let's just have a sale without going through any kind of process or any thought pattern or talking to any of the publishers or developers. It seems like there probably is a whole bunch of issues that Valve over the years have already figured out and dealt with, that the Epic Store is just going to make every single mistake that Valve has ever made, or every single mistake that Valve avoided making in their path to try to be as good as Steam. Meanwhile, they'll never catch up with Steam because Steam will always have more time and have just a early first to market advantage. Next we have a game on here called Deathmatch that's mixed. It's a pretty generic name, low effort name for an asset flip first person shooter, but it is oddly the only asset flip first person shooter we've seen today. It's English and Turkish as the languages. That is interesting also, but yeah, it's not good and it's multiplayer only. And remember, a lot of bad games I skipped over if they just visually looked bad. So the fact that I'm still talking about things that look pretty bad is kind of a shame. Let's control secret. And
For justice.
I assume playing a secret is counted as a spell. If not, I may not have any spells. Next we have a game on Steam called Exemption, which seems to be a low polygon asset flip fighting game, kind of like Chivalry. But just look how dark this is. Apparently they have magic too. It's early access for $14.99 with English being its only language. Yep. There are, compared to this game in particular, and this Unity Store pre-bought asset graphics, if you just want to fight player versus player and you want magic and you want sword swinging, there are way better Japanese free-to-play games that are on Steam where you could do that. So unless you just hate the anime style and you hate the lewdness of some of the costumes in the anime style, or you just love medieval style, I don't see any reason why you would play something like Exemption. I can see why you'd want to play Mordhau, because that game reportedly is actually designed very well and plays pretty well. So a Chivalry Mordhau style game makes sense, but just something you've never heard of before that's doing a medieval fighting simulator doesn't make a lot of sense. And of course it wouldn't be a week if Big Fish Games didn't put out a hidden object game. So we have Mystery Case Files Key to the Ravenhurst Collector's Edition out for $11.69. It seems like the collector's editions might be getting a little cheaper nowadays. English subtitles and full audio. Maybe Big Fish Games has finally realized that they can't sell their games for $13.99, or maybe they just are randomly changing the price for several of their products. Since they're selling their products, I think on bigfishgames.com first, they probably have sales metrics that could have them affect the pricing. Next we have a game on Steam called The God Beast, which is interesting looking. It has a weird looking art style, kind of like Killer 7, and you're fighting monsters and gods and doing a lot of hacking and slashing. This might be something, or it may just be that the art style has caught my attention because it is unique and different, and anything visually unique or different in video games usually catches my attention. So I'll put this on the follow list. It's $11.69 discounted, in English full audio but no other languages. You would kind of think that this was Japanese, but apparently not. And yeah, this might not be anything, but I'm willing to give it a chance. There was a spell. So if secrets aren't spells, what I just played was a spell, so that might help. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Hedon, which I guess is a Doom game. And what's interesting here is it's using the GZ Doom engine, which is a source port of Doom to make a first-person shooter. And so I'm playing the 2016 remaster of Doom, reboot of Doom, continuation of Doom, that doesn't use the Doom engine at all. It uses like id Tech 5, whereas Doom would be id Tech 1 if not the Doom engine by itself. This possibly using the source port of the GC Doom engine would not make me motion sick, but there's still a good possibility that this game would make me motion sick. And it's weird because it doesn't really look good by any objective outside standards. It looks good compared to the original Doom game, but it's not something you would really want to play on nowadays, and they want $6.99 to discount it. I don't see any reason why I would want to buy this though, so it's not going to make it to the fall list.
For justice, to battle.
I don't have enough mana.
In the turn, only got a couple more things. I forgot to mention or show these. I mentioned them, but I didn't show them. So 2 games from Disney have been added. Maui Mallard in the Cold Shadow from 96 or 86? So another port. This is, again, probably not the best way to play a game like this, but if you buy this, you're supporting Disney, and then I think you probably then can justify in your own head to go find a ROM and run this through the emulator to play the Sega Genesis version of this, which I think is the version you probably want to play. It's $5.09 discounted, and English is the only language. But it is certainly nice to see that as soon as Disney got LucasArts and Disney and Star Wars, they started to put out the old LucasArts games on Steam. It's kind of funny, they shut down their internal games division and then immediately started releasing everything they could that they owned to make more money. Excuse me, that was probably very loud. But yeah, there's no reason why these old games shouldn't be available for purchase. Same is true for Disney Hercules, and you can see this isn't even widescreen in the video. I think this was probably a Game Boy Advance game. And these are definitely historical games. Like a modern kid would probably not enjoy playing these, but they should exist. They should be self-published on Steam. It's $5.09. So when the Steam Summer Sale comes around, these are games that I very possibly will buy, just to try and have a complete collection of Steam games, of Disney games. Next, we have a game called Monster X Monster, which is a card-based dungeon crawler style game, it seems. It says it's a roguelike RPG card game. I'm a sucker for card games, and the animation style doesn't look terrible. It looks cartoony and silly. Seems like there's a colorful cast of enemies or characters you can fight. If you're playing it, it seems like the blue slimes of different styles. It's early access for $2.39, and it's English and simplified Chinese. So I'll put this on the follow list. But, you know, if it doesn't get... Well, it actually has quite a few positive reviews already. So people are liking it. And then I have only a couple more things, so let's just wrap up. I'm also completely failing to break up episodes again, so I need to get back to doing that. But yeah, today in particular felt shorter, although it really probably wasn't. So there's this game called Chris Rise, and it's a platformer, but it's a platformer wrapped around the inside of a tube, basically. And boy, does that look weird. And that's pretty much all I can say, is that boy, does that look weird. I don't know why you would want to do this. Maybe if you were in VR headsets, this would make a little bit more sense. But it doesn't support VR. It's English and Japanese. They call it a Metroidvania action game, but it looks to me more like it's just a platformer that you're wandering around up higher and higher to different things. I don't think I could play this, though. I don't think I could play this. I think this would just irritate me too much. And then that puts me at the Humble Bundle store, and we can look and see if there's any new Humble Bundles. Let's see. No, I don't see any Humble Bundles at all. So, anyways, I'm gonna check to see if there's an expansion that comes out next recording, but Tuesday. But I expect the solo expansion will come out on Thursday, and that's when I'm planning on doing that expansion, because I can't do it early, of course. So that's going to wrap up this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. Thanks to everybody who chatted. And if you want to support me even further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.